Hi, I'm John Hornick. Welcome to lesson 39 of Chef's Apprentice, learning to cook like a pro, one small plate at a time. This lesson is coconut miso glazed grilled salmon fillet. Restaurant chefs and cooks often start cooking a meat or a fish using one cooking method and finish it in another way. In this preparation, you will begin by grilling the salmon, make grill marks, and then finish the cooking in the oven. You will also learn to determine doneness using what I call the slice and check method. You will also begin to become conscious of the presentation side of the meat or protein element of the dish, which in this case is salmon, and making it look good. Techniques today are portioning salmon, grating ginger and chopping garlic, making a marinade and marinating, seasoning, using the slicing and check method of doneness, plating, and adjusting seasoning. So let's start cooking. Okay, let's talk about the mise en place that we'll need for lesson 39, which is coconut miso glazed grilled salmon fillet. Of course, we're going to need some salmon. Now, the description calls for 6 pieces of salmon that are about 1 inch to, say, 1.25 inches wide. That'll be 1 per person. I'm only doing 2 today, so I have a piece of salmon here that's a little over 3 inches. We're just going to slice it right down the middle. So we have 2 pieces. And this will be a serving for 1 person. At the end of the cooking, we're going to cut it in half into 2 pieces and plate it up that way. You'll need 6 of these if you're making enough for 6 people. I'm just making 2 today. All right, we will also need to have 1/4 cup of red miso, and we'll need to have about 5 to 6 ounces of unsweetened coconut milk. Now, this Thai Kitchen brand is great because it comes in exactly that size. It's just a little bit over 5 ounces. We need to have also the juice of 1 lime and 2 tablespoons of sake. We'll also need to have about 2 tablespoons of grated ginger. And I'll tell you a little trick about preserving ginger. I use these Talente gelato containers, as I've said before. Really good gelato, even better containers. And I put some ginger in there and then fill it up with either sherry, dry sherry, or sake. And it keeps for a really long time. And that way you can just take out a piece of ginger when you need it, chop it up, grate it, do whatever you need to do with it. Also need to have about 2 large cloves of garlic that have been chopped. And then we'll need to have 1 tablespoon of light brown sugar. We're going to need a high smoke point oil. You can use canola or peanut or avocado. We're using avocado oil today because it's handy. Also kosher salt, as always, and a peppermill for grating fresh pepper. And then we'll need to have some arugula that has been washed and dried. This is what we'll use to plate up the salmon at the end of the cooking. Okay, that's all of the ingredients. I'll break now and come back, and I'll show you the equipment we need for lesson 39. All right, let's talk about the equipment for lesson 39. We need a cutting board and a chef's knife. You also need a slicing knife to slice the fish, and you'll need a juicer to juice that 1 lime. I've already done that. A grater to grate the ginger, and a brush to brush marinade on the fish during cooking. You need to have a mixing bowl and wooden spoon to mix up the marinade. And then we'll need to have a Ziploc bag to do the marinating. And optionally, you can use one of these bag fillers, the Jokari bag filler, which I think is great. And a baking pan to put the bag in after you fill it with marinade so that the marinade doesn't leak out over the refrigerator if there are any holes in the bag. And then we'll need to have a grilling pan. Now, this is a cast iron Lodge brand, made in USA grill pan that has these ridges in the bottom, which will make grill marks in the protein when you cook it. You can also use an outdoor grill, but I'm going to use today this grill pan. I also need to have a brush to brush oil in the pan. Now, you could use a brush like the brush that you use for the marinade, but I also have this silicone brush. This can take high heat. Now, when we first brush the pan with oil, it won't be very hot, but we might then use the brush right before we cook to make sure that these grill ridges are covered with oil, coated with oil before we start cooking the fish. And then finally, we'll need to have a couple of sizzle plates. That's all the equipment that we'll need for lesson 39. We'll break now, we'll come back, and we'll start cooking. Okay, the first thing on our prep list is to mix the marinade, and I've already put the coconut milk here in the mixing bowl. We'll also need to have the miso and the lime juice. The sake. The grated ginger. The garlic. As you can see, I don't like to waste any. And the brown sugar. Okay, and we're going to mix that up. Okay, next step is to marinate the fish. So we're going to take our bag filler here and add the fish to the bag. And then we're going to add some marinade. Now I'm going to keep a little bit of this marinade because I'm going to use it later to brush the fish. And also, I made enough marinade here for the full 6 portions. And so this is, I have not scaled that down for this presentation. Let's try to squeeze some of the air out of the bag here. All right, now that's going to go into our baking pan, and we're going to put this in the refrigerator, and we're going to marinate it for about 3 hours. Now, I'd say 2 to 3 hours. I don't want to marinate it any longer than that. For delicate proteins like fish and even chicken, depending on how much acid you have in your marinade, it starts to break down that protein. So we don't want to marinate them too long, or it can make the protein, the salmon or whatever it is that you happen to be making, it can make it break down and start to get mushy. Okay, so we're going to do a maximum of 3 hours in the fridge marinating. Okay, so the fish has been marinating for 3 hours in the refrigerator. I brought it to room temperature about 20 minutes ago, and I've preheated the oven to 350 degrees. Now the next step is to brush a sizzle plate. Now this is the sizzle plate that we'll be using to finish the fish in the oven. I just don't want the fish to stick to it. Now I'm only making 2 portions here, so if you're making more, you might need more than 1 sizzle plate. Okay. Next step is to wipe off any extra marinade on the fish, on the top at least. My phone rang just in the middle of that, so I took an interruption. But anyway, I was saying we want to wipe off the extra marinade because the marinade could cause the salmon to stick to the grill. Now we only need to wipe the top off because it's only the top that's going to be in contact with the grill pan. Okay, we also want the salmon to be dry. Okay, again, if it's wet, it could stick to the pan. All right, next step is to brush the fish with oil. I'm using a high smoke point oil. This is avocado oil. You could also use peanut oil or canola oil. Don't use olive oil. It's not high enough smoke point. Okay. Next, season the fish. Well, here we are at the stove. We're going to turn the heat to high. And we want to get this pan very hot. Now I don't have any oil in it right now. There's some seasoning in the pan, so you can see a little bit of a glistening, but I haven't brushed it yet. So we're going to wait till it starts to smoke a little bit before we brush it with oil. We're just getting a little bit of smoking from the pan. We're going to brush across these ribs. Okay, I don't want to get a lot of oil down between the ribs, because if I do, as the salmon's on there, and the salmon, if it gets pushed down a little bit and goes down between the ribs, it's going to start to fry in that oil rather than frying on top of these ribs. Okay, so we just want to get the tops of the ribs oily and not have a lot of pooling of oil down between them. If you're doing this on a barbecue grill, you don't have that problem. All right, now let's put the fish into the pan. We want to put them at an angle to the ribs. And we're going to let this go for about 2 minutes, and then we're going to see if they'll start to release from the pan. All right, now a nice method for getting them to release is to use a couple of chopsticks underneath rather than a spatula. If you use a spatula, it's more likely that the fish is going to tear and not come off the grill easily. Okay, that's turning over nicely. Oh, beautiful. Okay, now what I want to do is pick this up and put it on a sizzle plate, okay? We're going to do the other one. That's good, that's released. Again, beautiful. Okay, we're going to put this into the oven for 2 minutes. Okay, it's been 2 minutes. Let's check them. Now we're going to use what I call the slice and check method. This is a variation on a method that's used in Japan. Now there's a center line in this fish where the bone had been. We're going to cut along, right along that where that center line would be, carefully, because we don't want to mess up the top of the fish, and see if it's done inside. Now I can see that it is not done on the bottom, okay? Still pretty raw on the bottom, all right? So what we're gonna do is put those two cut sides back together, put that little piece on there that fell off, right? And then we're gonna put it back into the oven for another 2 minutes. So the slice and check method is my method of checking to see whether the protein is done. Now, when you slice into meat right after it's come off of the grill or out of the oven or whatever it happens to be, without resting, it can lose liquids. Liquids can release. That's why you let it rest, so the liquids kind of get reabsorbed and they don't release. However, in Japan, I've seen them use this slice and check method many times, and it doesn't affect the final dish. With fish, they lose less liquid when you cut into them, so here, you know, we just cut it in half, see whether it's done. If it's not, put the pieces back together, put them back in the oven for a little bit longer. And if you're concerned about losing too much liquid in doing this, use an extra piece of fish that you're not going to serve at the meal, and then save that fish for lunch tomorrow. Okay, so it's been 2 minutes. Let's check to see how these look. Now, I'm going to look at the one that I already cut, see how that's looking. And that is looking perfect, okay? It's just medium rare down at the bottom. Okay, so I'm going to call these done, and we're going to meet at the board for plating. All right, so we're going to take this other piece and we're going to cut it the same way, carefully. Good. Now, we're going to plate up. First, a little bit of arugula. Then we're going to take the fish and arrange it artfully on top of the arugula. Okay. We'll do the other one as well. Now let's do it this way so we don't see that cut side. Take another one. Now you can arrange them however you think looks best, all right? I'm going to take that piece of salmon there, this piece of salmon here. Then we want to adjust the seasoning, just a little bit of pepper, and a little bit of salt. Okay, that is the conclusion of lesson 39, coconut miso glazed grilled salmon fillet. You can see photos of the finished dish on my Instagram, which is @ChefsApprentice, cook like a pro. Next up is pulled pork toast with roasted tomato peach aioli. Please remember to subscribe to my channel, and thanks for watching.